History is full of characters that has divided opinions for many years. Hero or villain, outlaw or champion of the people. Many countries have their own Robin Hood, who causes heated debates. But perhaps Australia has one of the most notorious figures to cause division amongst historians. This is the history of Ned Kelly. The exact date in which Ned Kelly was born is unknown, though it was sometime in December 1854, in the then British colony of Victoria. He was the third of 8 children to Irish parents, his father John Kelly, who was known as Red, and his mother Ellen Quinn. At the age of 21, Ned's father was found guilty of stealing 2 pigs and was sentenced to transportation to Australia, arriving on the 2nd of January 1842. On the 18th of November 1850, Ned's parents were married at St Francis Church. The couple subsequently turned their attention to gold digging and earned enough to buy a small freehold in Beveridge, just north of Melbourne. Ned's early years were difficult as the family's wealth declined and his father began to drink heavily. In 1864, the family moved to Arvenel near Seymour, where they soon attracted the attention of local police. As a boy, Ned obtained basic schooling and became familiar with the bush. In Avenel, he risked his life to save another boy from drowning in Hughes Creek. The boy's family gave him a green sash, which he wore under his armour during his final showdown with the police in 1880. In 1865, Ned's father was convicted in relation to the theft of a calf and sentenced to a fine of £25 or 6 months hard labour. Though the family couldn't afford to pay the fine, there is no records of Ned's father doing hard labour either. Badly affected by alcoholism, Ned's father died on the 27th of November 1866. The Kellys moved to Greta in northeastern Victoria, near the Quinns and their relatives by marriage, the Lloyds, where the family leased a small farm of 88 acres. However, the land was unsuitable for successful farming, and Ned's mother supplemented their income by offering accommodation to travellers and illegally selling alcohol. Having a hard upbringing, Ned himself turned to crime. Aged just 14, Ned met Irish-born Harry Power, a transported convict who turned to bushranging in northeastern Victoria after escaping Melbourne's Pentridge prison. Kelly's first brush with the law occurred in mid-October 1869 over an altercation between him and a Chinese pig and fowl dealer from Morse Creek named R. Fook. According to Fook, as he passed the Kelly family house, Ned brandished a long stick and declared himself a bushranger before robbing him of 10 shillings. Ned would commit a series of armed robberies with Power in 1870, and the police struggled to find them and identify Power's young accomplice. But soon the press had named Kelly as the culprit, and a few days later he was captured by police and confined at Beechworth Gaol. The partnership of Ned and Power would come to an end when Power was later captured, Power believing that Ned had informed on his whereabouts, though this is not known for certain. Ned was released from Beechworth Prison on the 27th of March 1871. 3 weeks later, horsebreaker Isaiah Wilde Wright arrived in town to see his friend Alex Gunn, a Scottish miner who had married Ned's older sister. Wright was riding a chestnut mare which he had borrowed without telling the owner, the postmaster of Mansfield. Kelly later claimed that he was unaware that the horse didn't belong to Wright. On the 20th of April 1871, Ned was intercepted by Constable Edward Hall, who suspected that the horse had been stolen. Ned was charged with horse stealing and sentenced to 3 years imprisonment with hard labour. Ned served his sentence at Beechworth Gaol, then at Pentridge Prison. On the 25th of June 1873, his good behaviour earned him a transfer to the prison ship Sacramento, anchored off Williamstown. He returned to Pentridge after several months and was released on the 2nd of February 1874, 6 months early for good behaviour. To settle the score with Wright over the chestnut mare, Ned fought him in a bare-knuckle boxing match at the Imperial Hotel in Beechworth on the 8th of August 1874. Ned won after 20 rounds and was declared the unofficial boxing champion of the district. In early 1877, Ned would return to stealing horses, later claiming that his group had stolen 280 horses. These crimes once again brought him to the attention of the police, which in 1878 came to the infamous Fitzpatrick incident. Ned and Constable Alex Fitzpatrick were once friends, until on the 19th of September 1877, when Ned was involved in a brawl with 4 police officers who were escorting him to court. Fitzpatrick was one of the officers, and Ned later claimed that Fitzpatrick harassed his family thereafter. When a warrant was issued for Ned's younger brother Dan, Fitzpatrick visited the Kelly home in hope of making an arrest. Finding Dan not at home, Fitzpatrick remained with Kelly's mother, in conversation for about an hour. 3 children were also present. Dan Kelly would later return and was arrested by Fitzpatrick, though Dan would ask to eat his dinner before being taken in, a request which Fitzpatrick granted. Minutes later, Ned rushed in through the front door and fired a shot at Fitzpatrick with a revolver, missing him. Ned's mother then hit Fitzpatrick over the head with a fire shovel. There was a struggle and Ned fired 2 more shots, wounding Fitzpatrick just above his left wrist. During the struggle, Bill Skillion and Bricky Williamson, a neighbour, entered the room, both armed with revolvers. Dan disarmed Fitzpatrick and now had his revolver. Wounded, Fitzpatrick was allowed to leave, riding away for about a mile when he found that 2 horsemen were pursuing. But spurring his horse into a gallop, he escaped and made his report. Despite the report of Fitzpatrick, the Kelly family had a different version of the event. In an interview 3 months before his execution, Kelly said that at the time of the incident he was 200 miles from home. According to him, his mother had asked Fitzpatrick if he had a warrant, and Fitzpatrick replied that he only had a telegram, to which his mother said to Dan, "You need not go." Fitzpatrick then said, pulling out a revolver, "I will blow your brains out if you interfere." His mother replied, "You would not be so handy with that pop gun of yours if Ned were here." Dan then said, trying to trick Fitzpatrick, "There is Ned coming along by the side of the house." While he was pretending to look out of the window for Ned, Dan cornered Fitzpatrick, took the revolver and released Fitzpatrick unharmed. If Fitzpatrick suffered any wounds, they were possibly self-inflicted, and that Skillion and Williamson were not present. Williamson, Skillion and Ellen Kelly were arrested and charged with aiding and abetting attempted murder. Ned and Dan were nowhere to be found. The 3 appeared on the 9th of October 1878 before Judge Redmond Barry. They were convicted as accessories to the attempted murder of Fitzpatrick. Skillion and Williamson both received sentences of 6 years, and Ellen 3 years of hard labour. After the Fitzpatrick incident, Ned Kelly, Dan Kelly and Joe Byrne went into hiding and were soon joined by Steve Hart, a friend of Dan's. The police had received information that the Kelly gang were in the Wombat Ranges at the head of the King River, and on the 25th of October 1878, 2 mounted police parties were dispatched to search for them. One party, consisting of Sergeant Michael Kennedy and Constables Michael Scanlon, Thomas Lonigan and Thomas McIntyre, unknowingly camped one night close to Ned's hideout, and that Ned had observed their tracks. On the following morning, Kennedy and Scanlon went scouting, while McIntyre and Lonigan remained at the camp. At about 5 p.m, the 4 members of the Kelly gang emerged from the bush and ordered the 2 policemen of the camp to surrender their weapons and raise their arms. According to McIntyre, each member of the gang was armed with a rifle, but according to Ned, they only had 2 guns. McIntyre was unarmed at the time and raised his arms. According to McIntyre, Lonergan made a motion to draw his revolver and ran for cover of a tree a few yards away. Ned immediately shot Lonergan, killing him. Later, the 2 other officers returned to camp and were advised to surrender by McIntyre. Again, what followed is debated, but the result was that 2 more officers were shot dead. During the exchange of gunfire, McIntyre mounted a horse and was able to escape. The following day, a search party quickly found the bodies of Lonergan and Scanlon. Kennedy's body was found 2 days later. All had been looted. News of the police murders caused outrage, and the government of Victoria announced a reward of £800 for their arrest, and this was soon increased to £2,000. On the 15th of November 1878, the 4 members of the Kelly gang, having refused to surrender themselves, were declared outlaws. Now outlawed, the Kelly gang tried to escape Victoria, but failed, with several near misses with the police. In need of money, the gang raided and robbed the National Bank of Australasia at Euroa, where they made off with over £2,000. While on the run, Byrne wrote out 2 copies of a letter that had been dictated by Kelly. On the 14th of December 1878, the copies were posted to Donald Cameron, a Victorian parliamentarian who Ned wrongly thought was sympathetic to the gang, and John Sadler, the police superintendent at Benalla. In the letter, Kelly made claims of police corruption and harassment of his family, and gave his version of the Fitzpatrick incident, the Stringybark police killings, and other events. Ned expected Cameron to read the letter out in Parliament, but the government refused to make it public. Newspapers, however, published summaries of their contents, with commentary. The police enlarged their numbers and began to crack down on Kelly sympathisers, arresting over 30 men believed to have given the gang aid. But despite this crackdown and the extra manpower, the gang robbed the bank at Geraldary. In response to the Geraldary raid, the New South Wales government and several banks collectively issued £8,000 for the gang's capture, dead or alive. With such a large sum being offered, it was inevitable that an informant would come forward. One such informant was Aaron Sherritt, a former member of the Greta mob. Upon discovering of Sherritt's betrayal, the Kelly gang planned retribution. On the evening of the 26th, 1880, at about 6:30 p.m, and after taking a hostage named Wick, Dan went to the front door of the hut while Byrne forced Wick to knock on the back door and call out Sherritt. When Sherritt answered the door, Byrne shot him through the throat and chest with a shotgun, killing him. Byrne then entered the hut and Dan was let in while 4 policemen hid in the bedroom. A 2-hour siege followed, in which the gang shouted threats to the police inside and failed to set the house ablaze before taking off. The police left the house the next morning and reported the murder of Sherritt, which prompted a special police train which would pick up reinforcements from Benalla before continuing through Glenrowan, a small town in the Warby Ranges. There, the gang planned to derail the train and shoot dead any survivors. Ned and Hart tried, but failed, to damage the tracks at Glenrowan, so they forced 2 local plate layers and some labourers camped nearby to finish the job. The gang then took control of Glenrowan station, along with hostages, and awaited the train. The expected train was a long time coming, and in that time Ned treated his hostages with respect, plying them with food and drink and music. He then allowed 21 of the hostages who he considered trustworthy to leave. Thomas Curnow, a local schoolmaster, was able to trick the gang into believing that he was a sympathiser, all in order to thwart their plans. Fully believing that Curnow was a sympathiser, Ned let him and his wife return to their home close to the railway tracks, but warned them to go quietly to bed and not to dream too loud. Acting on intelligence that the tracks had been sabotaged, Superintendent Hare had ordered a pilot engine to travel ahead of the police train. At 2:30 a.m, the pilot train was approaching Glenrowan when Corno went to the tracks, signalled it to stop and alerted the driver of the danger. The final showdown was now set, and the gang donned their armour fashioned from stolen plough mould and prepared themselves for a confrontation. Superintendent Hare immediately led a detachment of police towards the hotel, while the main body of troopers prepared the horses and equipment. The police moved into position, and the four outlaws positioned themselves in the shadow of the veranda in the front of the hotel and opened fire when the police were about 30 yards away in the moonlight. A rapid firefight ensued for around 15 minutes before someone shouted out that there were women and children inside. This caused a lull, but in the 15-minute shootout, Superintendent Hare was wounded by a shot to the wrist. Ned was wounded in the left hand and arm and his right foot. Byrne was shot in the leg and retreated into the hotel. Police surrounded the hotel throughout the night, and the firing continued intermittently. At about 5 a.m, Byrne was fatally shot in the groin while making a toast to the Kelly gang in the bar. Between 5 a.m. and 7 a.m, police reinforcements under Sergeant Steele and Superintendent Sadler arrived from Wangaratta and Benalla, taking the police contingent to about 40. Seriously wounded, Ned lay hidden in the bushes behind the hotel for most of the night. At dawn, dressed in his armour and armed with 3 handguns, he came out of the bush and attacked the police from the rear. Police returned fire as Ned moved towards them, staggering from his injuries, the weight of his armour and the impact of bullets on the iron plate, which he later described like blows from a man's fist. From the hotel, Dan and Hart provided sporadic covering fire. Ned was brought down with 2 shotgun blasts to his unprotected legs. He was then disarmed and carried to the railway station where a doctor attended to his injuries, where it was discovered that he had more than 28 wounds. With Dan and Hart still alive in the hotel, the siege continued, though there was a ceasefire to allow the remaining hostages to leave. Unwilling to storm the hotel, the police set the building ablaze. A Catholic priest entered the burning building in an attempt to rescue anyone inside, and discovered the bodies of Byrne, Dan and Hart. The exact circumstances of the deaths of Dan and Hart remains a mystery. Ned survived his wounds to stand trial on the 19th of October 1880, when he was convicted of willful murder and sentenced to death by hanging. The day before his execution, Kelly had his photographic portrait taken as a keepsake for his family, and he was granted farewell interviews with relatives. One newspaper reported that his mother's last words to him were, "Mind you die like a Kelly." On the 11th of November 1880, Ned's death sentence was carried out. He was aged just 25. In the century after his death, Kelly became a cultural icon, inspiring numerous works in the arts and popular culture. Ned Kelly continues to cause division in his homeland. Some celebrate him as Australia's equivalent of Robin Hood, while others regard him as a murderous villain undeserving of a folk hero status. But that is for you to decide.